Hi everyone. So in the previous video, we have discussed 4 questions that were asked from New Criticism of Literary Theory. So these questions that we took were from December 2018 to December 2021 and June 2022 cycles merged examination. So in this video, we will be dealing with the remaining questions that were asked from New Criticism. So let's look at the first question. In his recastings, the canon of English poetry, in new bearings in English poetry, which of the following pairs was downgraded by F.R. Lewis? I will repeat the question. In his recasting the canon of English poetry in new bearings in English poetry, which of the following pairs was downgraded by F.R. Lewis? So the options are Browning and Arnold, Milton and Shelley, Pound and Hopkins, Tennyson and Swinburne. Browning and Arnold, Milton and Shelley, Pound and Hopkins, Tennyson and Swinburne. So you have to give a special focus to this question because here the question is which of the following pairs was downgraded by F.R. Lewis. That is, which of the following pairs were not in favor of F.R. Lewis, because there were many, there is a good chance for you to write the answer Pound and Ezra Pound and Hopkins, because he actually praises them in this work. So anyway, before moving to the answer, let's look at the essay. So in New Bearings in English Poetry, it was published in 1932 by F.R. Lewis. So we know about F.R. Lewis. F.R. Lewis, he was a teacher and he preached and practiced an approach to literature that advocated close attention to a text, that is new criticism. So we know about F.R. Lewis. He is an important personality when it comes to new criticism. So here we know that we know about new criticism. New criticism, it advocated a close attention to the text, where it regards a literary text to be an autotelic text, and advocated the practice of close reading in order to understand and interpret this particular text. So according to him, sharp discrimination in evaluating a text was all that was important to him, and he taught literature with a missionary seal. So that was F.R. Lewis, because he felt that the study of literature was the only thing that could save us from the dehumanization that is inherent in the impersonal civilization of the technological age. So, New Bearings in English Poetry was one of his early works, and in this particular work, you can find that he speaks about the English poetic tradition, and he shows the influence of T.S. Eliot. Okay, so his work, you can find the influence of T.S. Eliot. And New Bearings in English Poetry 1932, it actually dismissed the popular acclaim accorded to this Victorian and the Georgian poetry. It actually move away from this Victorian and Georgian poetry, and here you can find that he proclaimed the importance of the works of T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound and G.M. Hopkins. Okay, he proclaimed the importance of T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound and G.M. Hopkins. So he follows Eliot in finding in the metaphysical poets the qualities needed in modern poetry. So we know about T.S. Eliot and the metaphysical poets. He has written an essay on it. So here you can find that F.R. Lewis, he follows Eliot in finding in the metaphysical poets the qualities that are needed in modern poetry, and he also values the other writers like Hopkins, Pound and T.S. Eliot. And here you can find that he also praises them for emphasizing wit and the play of intellect rather than late romantic sensuousness. Okay, so he actually praises them for giving importance to wit and intellect rather than the late romantic sensuousness. At the same time, he also criticizes the writers like Milton and Shelley. Okay, he also criticizes the writers like Milton and Shelley, and Lewis ascribes the failure of Milton's verse. But these criticism is mostly evident not in new bearings and English poetry, but he has also written a companion poem or a companion work to this new bearings in English poetry, that is Revaluation, a companion work for this particular essay, and in it he elaborates. So if new bearings in English poetry is a contemporary criticism, you can find that Revaluation is more of like a criticism on this romantic writer. So LEAVIS, he ascribes the failure of Milton's verse to its remoteness from any English that was ever spoken. Milton, he does not bother about the intrinsic nature of English. So according to LEAVIS, subtlety of movement. Okay, you have to remember that according to F.R. LEAVIS, subtlety of movement in English words, it depends upon the play of natural idiomatic speech. Okay, it depends on the play of natural idiomatic speech against the verse structure. So no such play is possible in Paradise Lost according to F.R. LEAVIS. No such play is possible in Paradise Lost according to F.R. LEAVIS, because unlike Shakespeare, this idiomatic speech is completely absent in Paradise Lost or in the works of Milton. So here, let's go back to the question. In his recastings, the canon of English poetry in new bearings in English poetry, which of the following pairs was downgraded by F.R. LEAVIS? Which of the following pairs was downgraded by F.R. LEAVIS? And the correct answer is option B, Milton and Shelley. The correct answer is option B, Milton and Shelley. And at the same time, he praises the writers like T.S. Eliot, G.M. Hopkins and Ezra Pound. Okay, I hope that's clear. Now let's move on to the next question. Which two of the following are works by I.A. Richards? Which two of the following are works by I.A. Richards? Okay, so we know about I.A. Richards, and we have in our videos we have discussed about the important works written by I.A. Richards. So here there are 4 options given where you have to identify the works written by I.A. Richards. There are 2 works written by I.A. Richards in these 4 options. So let's look at the options. Concepts of criticism, science and poetry, philosophy of rhetoric, English literature in our time and university. Concept of criticism, science and poetry, philosophy of rhetoric, English literature in our time and university. So these are the 4 options given. So here we know that concepts of criticism, it's a work written by René Welleck. It's a work written by René Welleck. Science and poetry, it is written by I.A. Richards. Philosophy of rhetoric is written by I.A. Richards. English literature in our time and the university, it is a work written by F.R. LEAVIS. So here we know B and C are written by I.A. Richards, so that comes as option C. So let's look at the notable works of I.A. Richards. So before looking at the notable works of I.A. Richards, we knew about I.A. Richards is an English educator, a literary critic, a poet, a rhetorician, and his work contributed to the foundations of new criticism. He's an important personality when it comes to new criticism. And we know about new criticism, that is a formalist movement in literary theory that emphasized the close reading of a literary text, especially in poetry. And why are they doing so? In an effort to discover how a work of literature functions as a autotelic text or as a self-contained and self-referential aesthetic object. So in order to explain these things, he has written many works in which he describes about practical criticism, about meaning of meaning, etc. So let's look at the works. The meaning of meaning, these are just the important works written by I.A. Richards. He has written many more. So the meaning of meaning, 1923, principle of criticism, 1924, science and poetry, 1926, practical criticism, 1929, philosophy of rhetoric, 1936. So let's look at the works once again. The meaning of meaning, 1923, principle of criticism, 1924, science and poetry, 1926, practical criticism, 1929, philosophy of rhetoric, 1936. So let's look at the question. So the options given here include science and poetry, philosophy of rhetoric. That is option B and C. That comes as option C. So the correct answer is option C, the works written by I.A. Richards. As I always say, you have to study the important works of the theories, because these are the direct questions that you can get from literary theory. So now let's look at the next question, and this question was asked in December 2021 and June 2022 cycles merged examination. Which of the following is applicable to new criticism? Which of the following is applicable to new criticism? Which of the following is applicable to new criticism? So you have to understand what new criticism is. In the previous slides I have mentioned the they mentioned the things of, or they mentioned the qualities of new criticism, or the proponents or advocate what new criticism advocates. So which of the following is applicable to new criticism? It draws considerably from the works of I.A. Richards and the critical essays of T.S. Eliot. It draws considerably from the works of I.A. Richards and the critical essays of T.S. Eliot. Some of its concepts are preempted by F.R. Lewis. It distinguishes between literary and scientific usage of language. It encourages an extensive exploration of the contextual and autobiographical background of the literary production. It vouches for a historical analysis of a text. It vouches for a historical analysis of a text. So here, which of the following is applicable to new criticism? So we knew about new criticism. There are many writers who belongs to new criticism like I.A. Richards, Clent Brooks, William Emerson, F.R. Lewis, etc. So let's look at new criticism. So what does new criticism suggest? New criticism, it opposes the history and meanings of the individual words. Okay, if for example, in a literary text, if a particular word means something, it does not goes for the historical or the meaning of this individual words, nor it go for the biographical circumstances of the author, why the author had written it, what does the author intend. So no such things as this authorial stance or authorial intentions. Beauties and morally elevating qualities of the text. So new critics, they never care for why the text has been written, is there any moral purpose for this text, the beauties of this text. So that's also something that the new critics never matters. Then what does they matter? The structure and meaning of the text, they were intimately connected and should not be analyzed separately. You cannot understand the meaning of the text without understanding the structure or the form of a particular text, because they are intimately connected and they cannot be separated. They should not be separated. So it focuses on the textual aspects of the text such as rhythm, meter, imagery and metaphor. So new criticism, it focuses on what is within the text, but when we say what is within the text, it focuses on the textual aspects of the text like rhythm, meter, imagery and metaphor. So let's look at the options. It draws considerably from the works of I.A. Richards and the critical essays of T.S. Eliot. That's a right statement, I.A. Richards and T.S. Eliot. So I.A. Richards has directly written about new criticism, and T.S. Eliot, he also claimed himself to be a new critic. Some of its concepts are preempted by F.R. Lewis. Some of its concepts are preempted by F.R. Lewis. That's also a correct statement. It distinguishes between the literary and scientific usage of a language. That's also a correct statement, because even according to I.A. Richards, there are two uses of language. There are two uses of language. One is the scientific use. And what does the scientific use say? It is a matter of fact. According to scientific use, it is a matter of fact. It requires undistorted references. Okay, for example, if you are using the scientific usage of a language, it requires undistorted references. It has got this absence of fiction, and the relation of references should be logical. And there is also this literary or emotive use of language. That is what we uses in fiction. Okay, so a logical arrangement is not necessary. It can be true or false. The attitude, we have to say that the attitudes due to the references should have their emotional interconnection. So that's a difference. That's a literary and scientific usage of language, and that also comes as a part of new criticism. So that's also a correct statement. It encourages an extensive exploration of the contextual and autobiographical background of the literary production. That's a very wrong statement, because as I have mentioned here, new criticism, it opposes any authorial stance from the author or the reader or the background of the time of the literary production. It watches for a historical analysis of a text. That's also wrong. So new criticism, it just focuses on what is within the text, and that too on the textual aspects of the text. So we can say that A, B and C are the correct options. A, B and C comes as option A. So the correct answer is option A. Now let's move on to the next question. Who among the following is associated with the term intentional fallacy in literary criticism? Who among the following is associated with the term intentional fallacy in literary criticism? The options are W.K. Wimsatt, Roland Barthes, J.H. Miller and John Keats. So the question is intentional fallacy. As I said earlier, in literary theory, direct questions can be asked from the literary theories, the works and the concepts. So intentional fallacy is one such important. Intentional and affective fallacy, they are some important concepts in new criticism, and it is formulated by Wimsatt and Beardsley together in their work The Verbal Icon. So William Kurtz Wimsatt and Monroe Beardsley, they have written this work called The Verbal Icon, Studies in the Meaning of Poetry. The Verbal Icon, Studies in the Meaning of Poetry, in which they mentions about two fallacies. One is intentional fallacy and the other one is affective fallacy. So intentional fallacy is mistake of attempting to understand the author's intentions when interpreting a literary work. For example, when you are interpreting a literary work and you go on to answer the questions, or you go on in searching the answers, like why the author has written it, what made the author did it, is there any personal or what are the autobiographical elements in this particular text. So if anything like that happens, that is a mistake or that is a fallacy according to Wimsatt and Beardsley. So mistake of attempting to understand the author's intention when interpreting a literary work. It occurs when a critic puts too much emphasis on what he calls external information when analyzing a work. Okay, it occurs when a critic puts too much emphasis on external information when analyzing a work. So his approach was a reaction to the popular belief that to know what the author intended. While interpreting a text, everyone has this curiosity and most people think it's right to know the author's intention. So his this intentional fallacy, it was a reaction to the popular belief of that time. So although we have to say that intentional fallacy, it actually according to him it is a fallacy, because when a literary critic or when a reader, one who criticizes it, forces this literary critic to assume the role of a cultural historian. When we go to find the intention of the author while writing this text, we are making ourselves, we are getting into the role of the cultural historian or that of a psychologist. Okay, so we should either be a psychologist, or we should either be a psychologist or a cultural historian, and to define the growth of the particular artistic vision in terms of his mental and physical state at the time of this creative art. So according to him, that is a fallacy. And with intentional fallacy, he also brings another fallacy that is known as the affective fallacy. Okay, with intentional fallacy, he also brings an affective fallacy, that is the supposed error, or we can say judgment on evaluating a text on the basis of its emotional effects on the reader. While reading a text, if you are analyzing this text, or if you are criticizing or interpreting this text on the basis of the emotional effects that this text has created on the reader, then that is called as the affective fallacy, because it is an answer to the impressionistic criticism. Okay, one is an answer to this authorial stance. So here in impressionistic criticism, we know the reader's response to the poem is the ultimate. It is the final. So according to him, that is not something something that is correct. According to him, that is also a fallacy. So it is not the reader's response to the poem that is the ultimate indication of its value. And this actually comes from the Aristotle's dictum that the purpose of tragedy is to arouse pity and fear. So if it arouses pity and fear, then it is regarded to be a perfect work, and not if it's regarded to be an imperfect work. So according to him, that is affective fallacy. So intentional fallacy and affective fallacy are two concepts explained in The The Verbal Icon, Studies in the Meaning of Poetry by Kurtz, Wimsatt and Birdsley. So, who among the following is associated with the term intentional fallacy in literary criticism? The correct answer is option A, W.K. Wimsatt. So, that is option A, Wimsatt. So, in this video, we have discussed about the questions that were asked from new criticism. So together there were almost 8 questions that were asked from new criticism, and most of these questions were very direct where you can answer. So make sure while you study new criticism, go for what is new criticism, what does it stand for, what does it oppose, who are the major writers, what are the major works, and the important concepts that they bring in these works. Okay, so these are the things that we have to study in new criticism. So that's all for this video. Thank you.